So hi everyone, my name is Cátia. I'm today going to be talking about understanding the downstream effects of preschool sleep for vocabulary, education and mental health in two data sets. So the ELS pack and the big data set that Kate just spoke about. And thank you so much for presenting it so well. It does make my job much easier. So this work has been done as part of my postdoc in collaboration with Amy, Gareth, and Michelle and Lisa. So I think when I speak about sleep, this is quite something that most people will relate to, not just because we all sleep, but because we have all been confronted with children's sleep at some point and the difficulties that they may pose. So we know that there's quite a lot of variability in sleep, not just adult sleep, but especially children's sleep. And this is really well captured in the book about sleep. And so they say, when the sky grows dark and the moon glows bright, everyone goes to sleep. Some sleep in peace and quiet. Some make lots of noise when they sleep. Some sleep standing up, and some sleep with one eye open. So this variability in children's in sleep is found within individuals, but also across and within species and across species. And this is something that we are very interested in. So this variability between individuals in how they sleep, and also how this may translate into outcomes at a later point. And so we see that in children's sleep, usually is initially characterized with this period where children sleep both during the day and the night, and then gradually it consolidates into nighttime sleep. And this sleep maturation process and the timing of when it occurs does seem to be predictive of later outcomes. And if you are interested in this, some work in my lab has shown that this sleep maturation is predictive of later vocabulary, for example. We also have seen some evidence that sleep difficulties that occur early in development do seem to persist throughout childhood and adolescence. And that about 10 to 29% of children and infants under the age of 5 that have some difficulties with sleep. So why do we care so much about sleep? Is it just that it is isolated, or is it having impact on other areas, not just in sleep in isolation? So we see that sleep is impacting mental health and development, whereby we see that those that have poor sleep have been found to show also poor academic performance, poor mental health, and poor language ability. Whereby, and also promising is quite a promising finding, but it has only been done in adults, that when you improve adults' sleep quality, it tends to lead to better mental health. So it's quite promising, but this research is still lacking in children and infants. The mechanisms by which sleep influences mental health and development are not very well understood, and that they are likely multifaceted. So we are able to show that there are direct routes whereby sleep has an impact in brain development. For example, there has been research suggesting that those sleep is related to the frontal lobe development. But also we have plenty of evidence suggesting that sleep influences offline consolidation, supporting the learning and retention of new words, and also that sleep loss often leads to poor executive function. For example, you are more irritable, have a shorter attention span, difficulties in modulating your impulses and emotions, and increased behavioral problems. But we can also think about indirect routes whereby chronic sleep loss affects physical health and increases the risk of obesity and associated diseases. And this may have broader consequences, and so does sleep problems that are negatively associated with social functioning. So having established the importance of sleep and the variability of sleep, why should we continue to examine this issue? There are still limitations to these studies, and the mechanisms by which sleep affects broader development are still poorly understood. And the majority of studies, like Kate has mentioned, are done concurrently. And when they do examine the longitudinal impact of sleep, they tend to examine that only until school entry. And they often fail to consider moderating effects. So we know that for example, in the case that Kate just mentioned, we know that education is affected by socioeconomic status. So if we do not control for that when examining the role of sleep, then we will not really understand whether it's sleep that is affecting education or whether it is socioeconomic status. We also, like Kate has mentioned, most of the findings tend to focus on experimental outcomes. So it is really crucial to think about what is important in the real world and what are the real world outcomes. So secondary data analysis is ideal to answer these questions. And during my postdoc, I'm focusing on two data sets. So the Avon longitudinal study of parents and children, often referred to as the children of the 90s, because I started following children that were born in 91 and 92 in the broader Avon area. And also the Born in Bradford dataset that is a bit more recent, that started following children born between 2007 and 2010. So why do we need both datasets? Both are very rich datasets. They have regular follow-ups. The only limitation to the children of the 90s is that the assessments were conducted a long time ago in the case of education, and they are not being used today. So we need to replicate those findings in the context of the Born in Bradford, since they are more up to date. Hence why we are using both data sets, and also it does allow us to have more confidence in the results if both data sets that capture quite different populations, with the Avon capturing more a less diverse socioeconomic status than the Born in Bradford. So it will be quite a useful exercise in itself. So we have three main work packages. The first one is the one I'm going to tap into today, is examining whether sleep patterns are stable over development. The second one focuses on whether sleep is able to predict later outcomes in later cognitive outcomes, mental health, school readiness, and academic achievement. And the final one that we have been doing through our project is to try to disseminate our research so that non-academics are able to understand the importance of sleep and how sleep is important, not just in our immediate day-to-day life, where it affects our mood and our ability to perform in the immediate, but also may have long-term effects that we need to take into consideration. So focusing on work packaging one, are sleep patterns stable over development? This is something that we don't know too much about. So we need to assess whether the children's sleep patterns that emerge in infancy are persistent across development. And in this case, we are focusing on childhood and adolescence. And also we wanted to determine whether, when we do not assume that there is just one population, what are there distinctive sleep patterns across development. So turning to the sleep variables that we are using, we decided to use all sleep variables that were recruited by ASPAC, but focusing only on the ones that are shared across time points, just because that was a requirement for our analysis of it, establishing how stability is whether is consistent or not across time. So the categorical variables that we have in this data set pertain to whether or not children have a sleep routine, whether they refuse to go to bed, whether they wake up early, have difficulty going to bed, get up after being put to bed, or get up after little sleep. So these tend to tap more into sleep behaviors during sleep. but also some continuous variable or more continuous variable. For example, the number of night awakenings ranging from 0 to 3, where 0 pertains to never, 1 to once, 2 to 3 to 4, a number of night awakenings, and 3 to more than 3. But also we had more information about the bedtime and wake-up time, and that is also something that we are focusing on. So as you can see here, we have quite a large number of participants, but they do decrease across time. So we are using, as Kate mentioned, full information maximum likelihood to deal with the missing data. Turning to the analysis, it is quite complex, and we are still in the preliminary stages of the analysis. So please forgive me if I'm not completely coherent, or if I miss out on some details. Please feel free to ask me more questions about this. So we started by conducting an exploratory factor analysis on each time point separately, so we could understand the sleep structure. This was a questionnaire that was not meant to capture sleep in a uniform fashion. It was serving a purpose at that time of capturing as much information as possible. So we needed to really understand what is the structure underlying sleep using these items. We then confirmed this analysis in the second half of this data set, just to make sure that these factors that were emerging were consistent across samples. We then ran the models that were answering the question that we had about stability. The first is the cross-lag model that examines whether sleep at each time point, at adjacent time points, is predictive of the following one, and the growth mixture model that doesn't assume this single population and is able to extract different populations from these or subpopulations from the general distribution of sleep across time. And I'm going to now present the results. So turning to the exploratory factor analysis, the scree plots have suggested that a two-factor solution was the best fitting model across time points. But as is typically done in exploratory factor analysis, you also consider the adjacent points, and we did that. The three-factor solution didn't fit current theories in the literature, nor was it consistent across time, so we kept the one-factor solution and the two-factor solution for further consideration. So as you can see here, in exploratory factor analysis, you tend to keep the factor loadings, as you can see in this table, that are above 0.30, as these are considered to be loading significantly onto the factor of interest. And as you can see, most of the items load into all the factors across time, except wake-up time. That one seems to load the least. Now turning to the two-factor solution, I'm just going to orient you to the table. 1 and 2 pertain to the factor, so this is factor 1, this is factor 2, and across time points. The first factor seems to capture all items except bedtime and wake-up time, and the second factor seems to capture sleep routine, whether or not children wake up early, and bedtime and wake-up time. So when examining these factors, we seem to think that factor 1 reflects some elements of sleep quality, and factor 2 some aspects related to sleep routine or sleep timing. We then transition to the second half of the data set, where we try to confirm the solutions that just emerged and see whether they still fit well to the data. So we ran 4 types of models, one-factor confirmatory factor analysis based on the one-factor solution. And then when it came to confirming the two-factor solution, we had 3 approaches. One was a classic two-factor confirmatory factor analysis, where you just you remove items that are cross-loading and also only keep items that have loadings that are above 30. This fitted the data quite poorly, so this was not kept. This was not considered for further analysis, and also was not considered for further analysis the two-factor confirmatory factor analysis that was more lenient and allowing for cross-loadings, and also loadings but only for loadings that were above 0.30. So the model that ended up fitting the best was the last model, that was the two-factor exploratory structural equation modeling, and this model fits the data in a EFA-like approach, allowing all items to load on both factors, but is in the SEM paradigm where you still have access to fit indices and so on. So it is a much less conservative approach than the classic confirmatory factor analysis. So again, factor one, just to reiterate, would tap into sleep quality, and factor two in more sleep routine sleep timing aspects of sleep. So turning now to the cross-lagged panel model, this model, as you can see, has these autoregressive paths, for example, between sleep quality at 18 months and sleep quality at 30 months, but also these cross-lagged paths where you can see how one variable predicts the other. So, for example, we see that sleep quality at 18 months is predictive of sleep routine at 30 months, but it is quite small. So these are the crossed effects are quite small, whilst the autoregressive effects are quite high. So suggesting that there is quite a lot of stability between sleep at adjacent time points. As you can see here, there's also in the dashed line are the non-significant results. So these cross-lagged effects also seem to decrease quite a lot across time. So there seems to be quite an independence between sleep quality and sleep routine, except with some when they are in the same time point, there seems to be some correlation between sleep quality and sleep routine, but still not that high. So these time points do seem to, the sleep factors do seem to be quite dissociable. When it comes to the interesting bit of do covariates, are covariates able to explain sleep quality and sleep routine? And in red, there are the ones that are negatively predicting sleep quality and sleep routine, and in green, the ones predicting positively. The ones that are not present are the ones that are not significant. I've removed them just for the sake of making the graph more interpretable. So as the household income increases, and so does maternal education and paternal education, does the sleep problems. So sleep quality is higher for the worst sleep, and better if the sleep is good. So that you need to think it in the opposite way. I apologize for that, but it just makes a bit more sense in terms of the data. But yeah, the higher the sleep quality, sorry, let me just trace back. The higher the income, the better the sleep quality, and so is the same thing for maternal education and paternal education. So the higher the maternal education and the paternal education, the better the sleep quality. When it comes to the household income and maternal education, so is the same case where the higher the maternal education and paternal education and the household income, the earlier the sleep routine. So likely to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. And for the remaining predictors, sex is showing that females tend to go to bed at later times in infancy, and that breastfeeding is negatively associated with going to bed early. And so is the case for maternal anxiety before birth, maternal anxiety after birth, maternal depression before birth, and maternal depression after birth. So they seem to be negatively associated with sleep quality and sleep routine. Turning now to the growth mixture model. This, as I mentioned before, doesn't assume that there's just one subpopulation. So if you have a graph like this, where all these data is perceived as one population. What the model does is identify these subpopulations that you can see in dashed. And this allows us to describe longitudinal change within each unobserved subpopulation. So instead of just doing that as a whole, you are able to subdivide the data into subpopulations and analyze the changes and differences in change across these different subpopulations. So assuming that you have raw data such as the one represented on top, you are able to analyze each individual person and see in which category they would fit. So in which trajectory would they fit? Would they fit a linear trajectory with almost no change, as in class 1, or a negative change across time, like in class 2, or a positive change, like in class 3. So in our models, what we found was when we examined the growth mixture model, the trajectories of children across time from 18 months to 9 years, when pertaining to sleep quality, is that there are 7 distinct sleep quality trajectories, and these are the ones that you can find here, with the most frequent ones, with the highest class membership being the green one here, and the class 1 in red, that is the one here at the bottom. Just to orient you to the graph, again, this is the lowest number indicates better sleep quality, and the higher the number, worse sleep quality. So what we see is that across development, 5 out of 7 sleep quality trajectories demonstrate improvements across development, which is quite positive, and also that a majority of children show persistent sleep quality problems or worsening sleep across time. So as you can see here, this blue trajectory on the top is quite consistently showing that there are sleep quality issues, and then there are some sleep quality trajectories that also show a worsening across time. Now turning to sleep quality, sleep routine or sleep timings, as you can see in the graph, the most consistent one, the most prevalent one is the red one, that shows almost a zero slope, where they are quite consistent across time. They don't show much variability in how early they go to bed and wake up, and the other ones just show a little bit more variability. But in the intercepts, as you can see, there is also very limited variability. So they start in a very similar point, but then diverge, and their trajectories then become quite stable across time. So the majority of children show a consistent sleep trajectory, or with very limited variation, though still significant. And about 20% of these children show considerable change, so the ones in the extremes, with around 5% of them showing either very early sleep timings or very late sleep timings. Just to conclude, children's sleep across development is fairly stable when compared to their peers, particularly when pertaining to the sleep routine or sleep timings, and this may be in part related to school attendance. There seems to be a trend for an improvement of sleep quality across development, but a substantial minority of children, there is still a substantial minority of children for whom sleep is getting worse or staying worse over time. And these are the children that likely need our help. In line with previous studies, only a small children or number of children show this consistent pattern of sleep problems. So it is really crucial to identify what predicts which category you land in terms of the sleep trajectories, as this will allow us to identify potential sleep risk factors for sleep problems that may be useful for intervention and prevention. In our future work, we'll be determining whether these sleep trajectories that we just identify influence vocabulary, school readiness, academic achievement, and mental health, which will also help us inform whether these trajectories are not just relevant for how children are experienced sleep, but also whether these have later outcome are important for later outcomes. So I just want to thank my PIs, so Lisa Henderson, Amy Atkinson, Michelle Sinclair, and Gareth Gaskell. You can email me if you are interested in our work and learning more about it, and the SLC for funding our project, and also all the families that took part and all the people that collected data for children of the 90s and born in Bradford. So thank you.